Did you know that over 4.4 billion people live in bigger cities today? That's 56% of the population choosing an urban metro over the suburbs and rural areas. The number of worldwide city dwellers is expected to double by the year 2050. With all of the world flocking to cities, it's hard to imagine that there are so many US cities that are losing population. In this list, we will explore the top 10 cities that are losing population since 2020. Why are they leaving and where are they going? With so many more people working from home since the pandemic, we can see that transition in where people are moving to and from. For this list, we are going to consider cities with a population of 100,000 or more, and we'll go by the percentage of people lost. Stay tuned to the end to find out the hip trends on what areas are gaining the most population. Number 10 is Hartford, Connecticut. With a population of 119,000, the city has lost 1% of its population since 2020 and is on a very steady decline. Its peak population in 1950 was 177,000, which is a far cry from where it is now. Hartford is one of the oldest cities in America, but it suffers from Northeast Syndrome, where the cost of living far outweighs the benefits. Situated 2.5 hours from New York City and an hour and 45 minutes from Boston, the city is just outside of commutable distance from either of those two metropolises. It's stranded in the middle of Connecticut, 40 minutes from the coast with nothing but high taxes and unaffordable housing. It has hot, humid summers and long, harsh winters. The entire state has been losing population since the pandemic, so it's no surprise that Hartford is part of that decline. One of the biggest reasons for leaving has been the high taxes. Connecticut has one of the highest total tax burdens of any state, so if you are able to work remotely, many are fleeing to places with the same amenities but lower taxes. Hartford does have a lot going for it if you are willing to fork over the majority of your paycheck to housing and taxes. The city is racially, ethnically, and linguistically diverse with a long and rich cultural heritage, but that cannot offset the downsides landing this city on this list. Number 9 is Seattle, Washington, which lost 1.72% of its population since 2020. The number one reason cited is a common theme on this video, and that is affordable housing. The vast majority of the city's residents are renters, and a desire to own an affordable home has been driving people out of the Emerald City. Another reason that has driven people out of the city is major layoffs from larger companies. Boeing, one of the city's biggest companies and sources of employment, has been undergoing massive layoffs. This is also driving people to leave the city. People have also cited sprawling homeless encampments, drug addiction, and safety concerns, amidst other reasons. Both violent crime and property crime are on the rise, further adding to the exodus out of the Pacific Northwest. The city is one of the most scenic on this list, with Mount Rainier as its backdrop, but Seattle is also famous for its rain. Of all the people who left Seattle and also left the state, the majority of them ended up in Arizona, which is about as big of a weather contrast as one can get. Number 8 is Detroit, Michigan, which lost 2.66% of its population. Detroit has been on a long and tragic decline. Its streets are an exhibit of urban blight, Rust Belt remnants, and a sad reminder of what the city once was. Black residents of Detroit are leading the exodus, citing racist lending practices, lack of opportunity, and a failing economy as reasons for fleeing. Residents, particularly black residents, have stated that to live in Detroit is to be perpetually working class, with little opportunity for upward economic mobility. The median income has increased only 8% for black residents, while it increased 60% for white residents. The few higher-paying jobs are going to outsiders who are being enticed to relocate to the city, leaving the locals to fend for themselves when it comes to vertical movement. Black Detroiters are also more likely to be denied mortgages regardless of their income level. The numbers show that higher-income black residents, for example, were denied a loan at a higher rate than moderate-income white applicants. Safety is also a consideration, with Detroit having the 4th highest murder rate in the nation. Though Detroit has a long way to go, in the summer of 2023, the city celebrated its rebound from one of its worst financial crises. 10 years ago, Detroit made history when it became the largest municipality in the country to file for bankruptcy. Hopefully, Detroit can make changes to be the comeback kid of the Midwest. Number 7 is Portland, Oregon. Portland has a population of just over 600,000 and lost 2.8% of its population since 2020. The reasons people are fleeing go far beyond the pandemic. Portland was once a mecca for young people with its scenic coastline, rugged mountains, and liberal lifestyle, but that has changed dramatically over the past few years. In fact, the city had grown for the 15 years leading up to 2020, and then it suddenly declined. The city is one of America's fastest shrinking cities, and you only have to flip on the news for a second to see why. One of the top reasons people gave for leaving is safety, citing concerns after the city cut police funding. A shrinking job market and expensive housing were other top reasons why people are heading out. Shooting and homicides increased 300% between 2019 and 2022 alone, which is twice as many as San Francisco, despite being only a third of its size. The homeless crisis has also fueled people's desire to head for greener pastures, and the city's mental health infrastructure seems to have collapsed under its own weight. Not all is lost for the City of Roses, as many believe the worst is behind the city. It's hard to imagine anything could be worse than the dystopian scenes from Portland over the past few years. The biggest surprise is that Portland isn't lower on this list. Number 6 is Chicago, Illinois, which has lost around 3% of its population since 2020. This city ebbs and flows, but has been ebbing as of late. Despite the insanely high crime rate, gang violence, and racial disparities, many people aren't leaving Chicago willfully. There has been a massive decline in blue-collar jobs, which has forced many people who were otherwise settled in the Windy City with families and friends to find greener pastures. Additionally, like Detroit, Chicagoans cite racial disparity in lending practices as another reason why many are leaving the city. If there's no opportunity to work and few opportunities to become a homeowner, why stay? Florida and Texas are the top destinations that Chicagoans are moving to, whereas most of its black residents are finding refuge in Atlanta, which is home to the most black-owned businesses in the nation. In the US, 2.4% of businesses are black-owned, compared to 7.4% in Atlanta. Safety is another major concern. For the 11th straight year, Chicago led the nation in homicides, with some weekends seeing as many as 40 shootings. Despite this, Chicago still draws millions of tourists with its theater, culture, deep dish pizza, and mini museums. Number 5 is Los Angeles, California, which lost 3.09% of its population since 2020. From its gold rush boomtown history to Hollywood, Los Angeles is one of the world's most iconic cities. The stunning beauty of the Hollywood Hills overlooking the Pacific Ocean is juxtaposed by sprawling homeless encampments, high taxes, and a city that seems unwilling to combat the high crime rates. The number one reason cited as to why people are leaving Los Angeles is politics, and more than just the politics are the results of the politics. The city is struggling to house its unhoused and are soft on crime. In an effort to reduce mass incarceration, the county's district attorney has created a criminal's paradise. Viral videos are all over the internet of people walking into department stores, grocery stores, and pharmacies and walking out with merchandise without repercussion. The infamous Proposition 47 has changed the robbery limit from felonies to misdemeanors, which has further fueled the unchecked crime problem. While many Los Angeles residents supported funding cuts to the police, the results have been a spike in crime and a police force that no longer responds to 30 types of 911 calls. No matter how bad things get in Los Angeles, tourists will never stop flocking to this beautiful city with a near-perfect climate. Number 4 is New York City, which lost 3.5% of its population. The Big Apple is still one of the most amazing cities in the world and the top visited city in the US with over 10 million visitors a year. And yet, people are leaving. The main cited reasons for fleeing were strict COVID policies, high taxes, and high cost of living. The average cost of living in New York City is $3,723 a month for an individual, which makes it one of the most expensive cities in the world. Owning won't get you much further, as New York has the 8th highest property taxes in the country. Businesses that survived a century were permanently closed due to the city's strict policies. Additionally, nearly 2/3 of the New York City public school population lives in poverty and were left to fend for themselves during the pandemic, losing access to free meals and childcare. Beyond the pandemic, the high cost of living and endless taxation has led to the mass exodus. New York is the state with the highest tax burden. The city has a cost of living 38% higher than the state average and 80% higher than the national average. New York City housing is a staggering 230% higher than the national average. Despite its residents leaving, the world still flocks to visit this unique city that never sleeps. Number 3 is Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which lost 4.57% since 2020. The city of brotherly love doesn't seem to love the city enough to stay put. Civic leaders have attributed the population decline to several factors, including crime, schools, the job market, local taxes, and dirty streets. But in a first-of-its-kind survey, the Pew Charitable Trusts found that there is no one prominent reason why people are leaving Philadelphia. The city seems to have a multitude of problems, despite its rich history and contribution to the founding of our nation. In fact, Philly is an anomaly on this list, as 70% of those who left didn't describe themselves as fleeing, but rather that they merely left to find different opportunities. Though not the overwhelming reason, job opportunity led the list of reasons for departing, whether the move stemmed from an inability to find the right position in Philadelphia or the opportunity and availability of better options elsewhere. Another reason for leaving has been cited as the desire for better schools. So while Philly may be losing population, it's not quite for the same reasons as those fleeing the coasts. Number 2 is probably no surprise to anyone who's been awake for the past few years, and that is San Francisco, California, which lost a whopping 6.2% of its population. The biggest surprise is that it's not number 1 on this list. San Francisco is a modern-day dystopia fraught with tent cities, crime, drug addiction, outrageously high costs of living, and a failing job market. Generational connections to San Francisco aren't even enough to keep residents, as some former San Franciscans have family members that survived the infamous 1906 earthquake and still stayed in the city. But that tie to history doesn't matter for residents who are being priced out of the city due to the housing crisis. Public health and safety is another major concern. Open defecation and used needles litter the streets, creating a public health crisis. A local news source surveyed 153 blocks of the city this past February and found giant mounds of trash and food on the majority of streets. At least 100 discarded needles and more than 300 piles of human feces were also found in downtown San Francisco, according to the report. It's hard to imagine that there is a city lower on this list. Where are people going? Florida, Texas, and Tennessee seem to be leading the charge in net incoming migration. It's probably no coincidence that these 3 states also boast no income taxes and a lower cost of living. They also have mild climates and booming economies. Number 1 is San Jose, California, which lost 7.92% of its population since 2020. What was once the heart of Silicon Valley, San Jose is hemorrhaging people as many big tech companies have left California for more tax-friendly states. Austin has recently surpassed San Jose as the 10th most populous city in the US. Despite the Bay Area city's mass exodus, the city still ranks in the top 15 places to live in the US. Many local residents don't understand the disconnect. The city, like many in California, faces high tax burdens, crime, homelessness, and unaffordable housing. Job opportunities have declined as so many big companies have left California, like Tesla and Hewlett-Packard, both of which relocated to Texas for its more business-friendly tax structures and politics. San Jose still remains a relatively wealthy city with a gorgeous year-round climate, but if residents cannot afford to live there and remote working opportunities allow for greater mobility, then San Jose just can't compete. To learn more about the top 10 rudest cities in America, click this banner and continue to watch more from our channel.